Good evening, everyone. Hi, it's great to see your faces. A little housekeeping. We are going to be filming. There are signs posted and taking photos. If you do not want to be filmed or have your photo taken, please stay out of the way of the camera, or just or just also let us know, and that will be no problem. Let me see. My name is Mars Lovejoy. I am the new programs manager at Public Art St. Paul. Thank you. This is my first critical conversation, and I am happy to be here with you for our second critical conversation titled Language, Identity, and Culture. Critical Conversations is a contributory program to Public Art St. Paul's WAKPA Triennial Art Festival, in that such conversations help shape these themes and concerns of the festival. Public Art St. Paul is, as its title conveys, an organization that since 1987 has contributed to the development of public art by consulting the City of St. Paul on its systematic integration of public art in its construction development projects. Besides this purpose of our founding, we organize and stage the mentioned WAKPA Triennial and steward the near 20 sculptures in Western Sculpture Park, a park we activate annually with our youth arts workshop program, Earth Lab. We encourage you to stay connected by signing up to our e-blast, which I saw many of you did, so thank you for that, as we love seeing and hearing from you. I would now like to introduce our moderator of this evening's panel discussion, which should last until about 7 p.m., Bob Cozzolino. Bob Cozzolino is an independent curator, art historian, and critic based in Minneapolis. He curates collaboratively in partnership with artists, colleagues, and broad communities. Although he has worked on topics from the 19th and 20th centuries, he regularly works with contemporary artists in examining history. He considers himself a curator of fluid time, not bound to the labels and bins imposed on the field. He has curated over 40 exhibitions, including most recently as the lead for the reinstallation of the Minnesota Museum of American Art's permanent collection, Here Now. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Mars.
And I will say one thing. This is the mic, and we'll be passing it. Okay. And if you can just speak clearly into the mic, and by Critical Conversations 3, we'll have a better mic setup.
All right.
Thank you all.
Falcha, welcome. Thanks for coming. This is a great turnout. I really appreciate you being here. I'm going to introduce our two conversants today for this critical conversation. To my immediate left is Wakiņyań Watogla, or Wild Thunder Horse, also known as Ryan Dixon, and he's an enrolled member of Oglala Lakota Nation of Pine Ridge, South Dakota. He's a Dakota language instructor at the high school and community level and co-founder of Wakiņyań Watogla, which is a Lower Sioux Early Head Start Dakota language immersion school. And with the core belief of decolonization through language revitalization, Ryan is working toward growing the language programs in the community and strengthening Indigenous language revitalization across the world. He lives in Wakiņyań, which is Lower Sioux Indian community, with his wife, 3 daughters, and 2 grandchildren. He seems too young to have grandchildren, but whatever. Dáithí Sproule, over here on the far, your right, is a guitarist, singer, and teacher, and a native of Derry in the north of Ireland. He's lived for many years here in Minnesota. He's recorded and performed around the world with many of the greats of Irish traditional music, including Trian, Fingal, James Keane and Randall Bays, and for more than 30 years with the Irish band Altan. His compositions have been recorded and performed widely. And he's had a lifelong commitment to the Irish language and culture and studies early Irish poetry and history, and those studies that he's done on his own have been published in the magazine in Erhu and Journal of Royal Irish Academy. His collection of short stories in Irish you're going to have to say that, please. Antiavella was published in 1987. Dáithí has taught early and medieval Irish at University College Dublin and courses on Celtic culture, mythology, and history at the University of St. Thomas and the University of Minnesota. And he's been a teacher at the Center for Irish Music in St. Paul in Minnesota since 2006. So please welcome Ryan and Dáithí. So this conversation is a conversation I've been wanting to have and moderate for a long time. It's very meaningful to me. My mother's parents were born in Ireland, and I have ancestors in the west of Ireland specifically, all the way down. I've recently applied for Irish citizenship, and my kids keep asking me, when can we flee the country? So we'll see. But it's been very meaningful to me to, as a percussionist since 8th grade, to start taking lessons at the Celtic Junction and at the Center for Irish Music in Barran, which is a percussion instrument. So I'm getting more in touch with my Irish roots. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and that part of my family, even though I have this name Cozzolino, was really, really important to me. But I don't think I really understood how important it was until I moved here in 2016 and started to become friends with a number of Indigenous artists who are very close friends of mine, and started to talk to them about language revitalization in their generation, which is my generation, after it having been suppressed or been something that wasn't kept up in their families. And that started actually making me wonder about my own ancestry and the lost things that I could reclaim in my generation and then hopefully turn on to my kids. So I've started taking Irish lessons. And so my interest in Indigenous art here, and also my interest in amplifying that part of my identity, is kind of coming together in a lot of different things and in this conversation. So I'd like to just start with you two by thanking you for being here, and then just starting, if you could talk each about what led you to be so involved in these languages, and how your role as a teacher is something that you're putting forward in your own life and in your culture.
Wakiņyaņ Watogla. So good to see everyone. I greet you all in a good way. So I have been teaching language about 12 years. I grew up around Lakota language. My grandmother was a fluent speaker, and I was lucky that at an early age, maybe 6, 7 years old, I had realized that my grandmother spoke a different language and that we had our own culture. And so that was something I'd always been passionate about, but I had didn't really know how to go about asking how to learn the language. She could speak, but she didn't really know how to actively teach me because of she had, been through the boarding school, suffered many abuses. I never really wanted to know the full story because, that's your grandparent, when you're a child, that's your best friend. But I lived in the Lower Sioux Indian community. I was about 31 years of age at the time, but people in the community knew that I spoke 20, 30 words. Like, I've always had, a handful of words in my head, but I couldn't really converse. Just like some small talk. And so with that, I became an apprentice. My first year or two, I didn't really have someone to work under, but with that, I eventually was introduced to Glenn Wakiņyaņ. He's one of the first language speakers here in Minnesota, Makoche. And he made it all click for me. And just one day, it just all made sense. And I was able to hold conversations with my grandmother before she passed away. I know that meant a lot. It meant a lot to me. I know it meant a lot to her too. But from there, I came to realize that the language has a spirit. The language is sacred. Dakota Pikin, Daku Dakota, Ichiko Apiro. So it connects you to everything Dakota. And once I made a relationship with that spirit, made a friendship with it, I will always, so I kind of work for the language, and in return, the language provides for me. The language has taken me all over the world. I've met many beautiful people, cultures. The language has done all that. The language puts food on the table for my family. I see the good that it's done for my community. I've been in the high school about 7 or 8 years, and we've also had our immersion school about the same time. And I just see the positivity that it brings the children who identify, or they're really looking for their identity, especially like in the high school years, and so they seek the languages, and it really grounds them, and it's going to lead them to good things into the future. But that's why I do it. I now have a grandson. He's about 15, 16 months, and I tried to speak only Dakota to him, and he understands a lot. He can't really produce yet, but in 1868 there was a treaty made with the Lakota Nation, and there was a quote from that time from a Lakota man, a Lakota leader, and he said, 7 generations from now, things will start to come back to normal. And 5 generations ago, there was a man named uṟka runs against, and that's who I descend from. So I'm 5 generations from that. My daughters are 6, and my grandchildren are 7. So I already see how things are coming back to how they should be. And I don't know, man. That's all I got.
Hello. Well, that's wonderful. It's such an honor for me to be here, to be asked to be here. I do a lot of, I do teaching, and I've played a lot of music and so on. But to be here and talking about the language and the culture and so on, and to meet Ryan is a great honor, and to be part of this is really wonderful for me. So I suppose, starting from where I was born and the situation I was born into, I'm from Derry, and I suppose it's when you look back, then you can interpret, you understand better what was really going on and how you fitted in or didn't fit in. So now when I look back, Derry is on the border, in the border between the north of Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And of course, it's inescapable, the business of, colonization. And Derry is still part of the United Kingdom. And then just a couple of miles up the road is the border with the Republic, the part of the country that it got its freedom and got its home rule and so on. And the schools in Derry were, there are the Catholic schools or Protestant schools. Catholic actually meant nationalist native Irish people, and Protestant really meant people who were descended from the settlers who came in, who still owe allegiance to Britain, and even though they're as Irish as any of us, they don't feel that that's where they're looking to England. So I was raised in a situation of division and conquest and discrimination and so on. The Catholics in the north of Ireland were discriminated against in basically all the same ways that African American people have been here and still are in many ways. And so that was my situation. And as far as the language was concerned, it was around me almost immediately, because Derry city, none of the cities have a lot of native speakers. The cities are English, definitely English speaking, but most people from the nationalist side have a few words of Irish, and my mother's mother had been an Irish teacher, and she had passed away before I came along, but her books were still around the house. So that was another thing that when I started in the music later on, I realized, oh, hang on, there's this songbook, and that's my granny that I never met, and these are her songs. But anyhow, so I went to secondary school, what you would call high school. You know, I had already actually gone in for these little singing competitions we were put into, called the Féishes. So the Féis, which you would have here in the Twin Cities. In Derry, it was really, I feel as if the emphasis is on dancing mostly here, but in Derry it was for singing and playing and dancing. So I started learning songs in the Irish language, you know, phonetically from the age of 7 or 8 for these little competitions. And then when I got to what you would call high school, then it was just another school subject. Even though we were under British rule, you know, Irish language was a school subject, just like French and maths and so on. And I was very academic, so I did. And also I had an incredibly brutal teacher who punished us with the strap in the traditional fashion. And I was very susceptible to threats of violence. And so I did very well at my Irish. But as it happened then, I did well at it, and then he sent me, or he gave me a little scholarship when I was 14 to go to the west of Donegal. And in the west of Donegal, there's one of these regions called Gaeltacht, where the Irish is still spoken as a native language. So there's a sprinkle of them all along the west coast. And I ended up going there every summer, and you know, made friends. So it's through, I associated the language with very dear pals and also girls that I fancied and so on. We had singing and dancing and everything. But I really loved the songs in Irish. So the music and the language are very knit together for me. And so that when I went to university in Dublin then, I started, you know, playing in folk clubs and so on, and I was lucky enough to meet people who, we got radio and TV gigs. Now, it was all nepotism. You know, somebody's aunt worked for RTE, so we did all this stuff. But when I got to college, I was aware of the struggle to revive the language, so that we have that in common, you know, even though, as I was saying to Ryan there, in a sense, we're lucky. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of people in Ireland who can speak Irish, but there are only maybe about 70,000 who are really native speakers who use it every day. And so I was very aware of the struggle to bring back our language, which had been gradually dying out for hundreds of years. And I thought that it was really sort of getting nowhere. You know what I mean? You had that feeling, this is a failure. And but being a musician and singer, I thought, it's the music. The music is the path to bring back the language. Because everybody loves music and song, you know? And I think that, not to pat myself on the back, but I think I was right, you know? And a lot of things happened that connected music and language, and I think really helped the language. So that's basically how I got going with the Irish language.
There's a lot that you both have just brought up that I want to talk about, but let's just stay on music for a moment. And I wonder, Ryan, if you are finding that as you're teaching young people, Dakota or Lakota, whatever it is you're teaching, that connecting them naturally with cultural practices, including music and ceremony, is a way that language is sticking and they're getting it, and they're getting it in their bodies. If that's kind of similar to what Dáithí's talking about with the language being connected with the music, if that's something you're finding.
Yes. So I play a little guitar, but I'm not on Dáithí's level here. But anyways, yes. So we have a lot of songs in our ceremonies, Sweat Lodge, Uwipi, We have more social songs like your wachipi, your powwows, all that. So that song really helped me a lot because I went to ceremony a lot, went to sweat a lot, and I would always hear these songs. And so yes, you do absorb the language. And I always try to explain this also. So when you're learning a second language, it's very, very awkward, and it's going to take time to get through the awkwardness. And one reason is we don't remember, for those of us who English was our first language, we don't remember learning language. We absorbed it from our parents or our relatives. You know, we had to make sounds, you know, almost 1,000 times before we could actually produce that sound. So you're absorbing things, and with the songs, I always try to teach the songs, especially in my high school class. I go through and translate them because it's very important that we get these songs right. It's very important that we conduct our ceremonies in the language. I've heard from elders, if we ever lose that ability, then we have lost, then we are no longer Lakota or Dakota. The language is your identity. You know, the language is, you know, how, you know, is the Lakota, if you ever want to know how Dakota or Lakota think, the language is kind of like you're looking through their eyes, describing the world. But with our immersion school, we've added song to our daily routine. We have a morning routine. We sing 2 songs in the morning, and we're going to keep adding songs. Maybe, you know, before we leave in the day, we'll add a couple more songs. Besides like nursery rhymes, we do those too. But the kids, you know, they're 2, 3 years old, and you know, some of them are, you know, singing their hearts out. I mean, they know the words already. And we picked that up from Hawaii. We've gone and visited Hilo a couple times in their immersion programs over there. And the way they incorporated song, I just thought it was beautiful, and it stuck with me, and I made sure that we implemented that when we returned.
So the other thing that you mentioned, which was so beautiful, is that discussion about the 7th generation sort of revitalizing things in your grandchildren, being that generation from that particular person that you descended from. And so I wonder if you both are seeing like a rise in interest in reclaiming and learning amongst the generation that's coming up now. And I include myself in that, but then you're talking about your descendants. In the Irish language, in Indigenous languages here, in what's now known as North America. But I feel like I've noticed, at least with Irish, that it seems like there's a massive revival of interest in Irish culture on the island, amongst artists, musicians. There's the rap group Kneecap we were talking about earlier that's rapping in the Irish language. And there's this real understanding of why it's important to live these endangered languages. And I wonder if you're both, how you respond to that and what you're seeing yourselves.
Well, I think there definitely is. The way I would express it is that there's a huge increase in respect for the Irish language, because if you go back 40 or 50 years, in the north of Ireland, you know, the part that is the 6 counties that's still under UK rule, you know, the nationalist people would have had respect for the Irish language, and maybe, you know, there was a fair amount of, definitely respect for the language. It's a difficult language to learn, you know, and if it's a school subject, you know, you might have negative feelings about it, you know, particularly if you're getting beaten up for making grammatical mistakes. So that was happening in the north. But in the Republic of Ireland, you know, once there was, you know, Home Rule from 1921 or whatever, the government committed itself to reviving the language, to the effort. And there were a whole, changed the or the road signs into Irish, and Irish, all the proceedings of the Parliament are translated into Irish. There was money put into book publishing. They worked on the whole lot. There's so many sides to this subject, but we had these different dialects. So we want to have one educational system. So we have to have one way of writing and speaking the language for the teachers around the country. So they had to clean up the spelling system, standardize the grammar, all this stuff. But one of the worst things then was that they made Irish compulsory for getting into the civil service, which now Ireland had been ground down, the Irish people had been ground down and kept poor for hundreds of years. It was through policy, and deprived of any opportunity to rise in the world as policy and law and so on, as well as being dispossessed of their land and so on. So, the after effects of that continued. Ireland wasn't strong economically, and the civil service was one of the places where you could maybe rise in life, but you had to have a high standard of Irish. So, and then the Irish language was the language of the country, and it was associated with poverty because of the thing that I've just said. The Irish language was associated with poverty. And so that is why people, for the sake of their children and so on, wanted to teach them English. And English meant you were going to do better in the world and so on. So all that negativity, a lot of people really hated Irish in the cities, which is a terrible thing to say. So there would be a certain minority of people obviously loved the language, were involved with Irish music and dance and etc. But there was a huge negativity, and I saw that in Dublin when I went to Dublin. Coming from the north, I could see that what was going on, and I taught a little bit in a school in the city centre of Dublin, attempted to teach Irish to these boys who hated the language. But anyhow, so the things have changed, and I think that one of the changes was due to the Celtic Tiger. Which was this boom in the Irish economy. So Ireland, due to various economic planning things at a government level in Ireland from about 60s, 70s, maybe the 70s, and taking off in the 80s, and getting American multinationals into Ireland and so on, Ireland, and then having a really educated, highly educated workforce who were ready to go. You'd been sitting around for 600 or 700 years waiting for a decent job, And it really, that really happened, and people just bounced. You could see young people looking more confident and modern and everything. And I think the Irish language benefited from that. And I think it still does. And then the music really helped, like people enjoying music from the 60s on. We started having more entertainment and sing-along, jolly music in pubs and so on. And some of that was in Irish. And then the bands were touring, and everybody loved them, all that stuff. So there's a wave of positivity and increased respect, definitely.
I also would say, like speaking Dakota, Lakota, something similar, like you could associate that with poverty and not doing well, because when you had the generations coming out of boarding school, they thought you would do better in life if you didn't speak the language, and so that had a big effect. But so I've been involved with language around 12 years. I've lived in the Lower Sioux Indian community for about 22 years, and when I first moved into the community, there was very little language, but we've done a lot of work raising awareness. A lot of people were unaware of the number of speakers that we had. Like here in Minnesota, Makoche, you might have 5 first language Dakota speakers, but only one of those was actually born in the state of Minnesota. And so we've raised awareness. We let people know, hey, we're on the UNESCO scale of language loss, we're at an 8B. The language is seen as sacred. And Wakiņyaņ Watogla, it can't die. It won't die. The belief is that it'll go away, it'll be dormant for a while, and when it needs to come back, it will. But, we don't want it to go dormant. It's our identity, it's who we are. So we have, we've utilized social media, games. We've, translated everything in the building. We've welcomed Lower Sioux signs in the language. We're trying to produce books and curriculum. So we're in a lot better place than we were when I first started. And I believe the children or the youth in the community have really taken a hold of the language, and they're going to take it much farther than I have. And that's always been the goal, that whatever I do, I want my students to go beyond that, make it better.
Well, and then I wonder if you've noticed, the high visibility in popular culture and in the art world, for instance, of Native artists, particularly superstars from this particular region, like Deannie Whitehawk, Angela Two Stars, and folks like that who are really have a high visibility around the world now, not just in the United States, but also, there's Reservation Dogs, there's Sean Sermon winning awards, this kind of permeating the consciousness of people that may not have thought about Dakota culture or, the Ho-Chunk or whatever. If you feel like that's revitalizing like a community and making folks think it would be cool to learn Dakota, you're noticing those kinds of things.
Yeah, so actually when I started 12 years ago, it was me, Vanessa Good Thunder, Grace Goldtooth, and Dallas Goldtooth, who you may know as Spirit from Reservation Dogs, William Knife Man. So we were all language apprentices at the same time. So I always joke and say, well, Vanessa, she runs the school now. She's getting her superintendent license. We got Grace, she was on tribal council, and Dallas, he's a movie star, Reservation Dogs, and here I am. I'm just a high school teacher. But yeah, but Dallas, having him visible, he's somebody who has always been in the language community. So Dallas actually speaks the language. He taught the language for a while. And it's good to have these shows out there because, a lot of people think we're extinct. You meet people who've never actually met a Native American in their life. But we are still here, and we will always be here, and especially like in the state of Minnesota Makoche. So I saw a quote, an Irish quote, and I forgot how to say it in Gaelic, so forgive me. But it's a country with no language is a country with no soul. And that's true. And for Minnesota Makoche, Dakota language is the soul of Minnesota. It's the first language of this land, and the land still remembers. It's just we kind of forgot, but now we're starting to wake up and remember again. But it's awesome having more Native Americans visible through show. There's a lot of good documentaries out there, and it's good to have actual Native Americans telling their own story, where in the past that didn't really happen, but nowadays you have artists on the Writers Guild and all that. And a lot of those people that you see out, that are visible, they are culturally connected. So I do know a lot of the 1491s, and they do care about this stuff. And now, like one thing I was a little envious of in Ireland, they have an Irish language channel. Like everything is in Irish. I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, TG4. Yeah, TG4. And so that's something we need to do, because with younger people and some older people too, they don't think the language is useful. They don't think it's You can use it in modern times, but you can. Anything you can say in English, even though it's not a one-to-one translation, you can get around to saying whatever you want to in the language. And like shows like Dark Winds, they make sure to put the language in there. And that's really cool to see, you know, for Indigenous people to hear their languages in these spaces where they're visible, you know, all across Turtle Island in the world. So that's really helping, and hopefully we'll utilize more social media and dubbing movies. Avengers was done a couple years ago. Mark Ruffalo said he's gonna pay for all of them to be. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to doing things like that. Actually, next year, hopefully I'll be able to spend more time. We're gonna try to do reservation dogs, but it's kind of hard to get around the cussing because there's no actual cuss words in Dakota language.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you both about was, you know, Ryan, you have been to Ireland and to Wales, and you've also been to Hawaii, you mentioned. And so I guess one of the things I wonder about is how much you're seeing a value in folks who are involved in this work to keep languages alive and expand them to the new generation. Sharing ideas, sharing cultural ideas, sharing pedagogy, and those kinds of things amongst one another. I mean, I think there's a long history of Native Americans and Irish folks collaborating, going back to Angkor Mor, the Great Hunger, when the Choctaw helped the Irish, and then the Irish during COVID gave money to Navajo Nation, I think, to help support them. So there's this reciprocity that's happened. But I wonder if you're seeing, as you travel around, the benefits of talking about this amongst folks who are trying to teach their languages to new generations.
Yeah, so I see a lot of, you know, parallels between the cultures, especially cultures that have been colonized. We've been colonized in different ways, but we're kind of all in the same boat. We're trying to reclaim our language, our culture, in the best way that we can. So I really enjoy, you know, Hawaii. That really opened my eyes because they were at a time when they only had 8 Hawaiian elders who, that's all I knew was Hawaiian. And now there's over 40,000 people across the Hawaiian Islands that speak the language. If you go to their University of Hawaii Hilo, it is larger than the library here. Just the one section for language. And when you go there, you can't speak any English. Everybody's speaking Hawaiian. They'll have people come up and translate for you. But they're really serious about that. And you know, anything worthwhile in your life is going to take some work to, you know, get to that goal. And so it can be done. And, you know, traveling to Hawaii, I've been up to different reservations in Canada. You know, as a teacher, linguist, whatever, I was really curious in Ireland, so I would, you know, ask everyone. And ask what things worked for them, what didn't work. A lot of things I heard is in Ireland was that making it mandatory in school didn't work out so well because the
compulsion, you see,
yeah, yeah, and they said a lot of the curriculum wasn't really modern. It's not, you know, and so like I take away little things from every community that I go to, and I try to bring it back to my community, and you know, make what we're doing a little better. And whatever I've done, you know, I share with, you know, whoever, because the end goal, we all want to speak our language and continue that growth and do what we need to do for our children. So, you know, I really enjoy just, you know, networking and just sharing goals and dreams and just whatever. I really enjoy it.
Well, about that thing of the compulsion and so on, I think it has to be done in a way that is natural and attractive, you know, and works with the natural tendencies of people, you know, if you're reviving. So when the first thing I saw that worked I was saying that I had a poor opinion of the, you know, how well we'd done with reviving the language where I went to college. But they started this thing, there's an organisation called the Gaelic League in Ireland, Conradh na Gaeilge, that was started in the late 1800s, and they've done wonderful work in teaching the language and so on. But they had their headquarters in Harcourt Street in the centre of Dublin, just beside Stephen's Green. And they got the idea of opening a pub in the basement. And it was like a club. It was called the Club, but we still call it going to the club. It was Club on the Gaelic League Club. And it was a bit like, you know, you knock on the door and somebody came to the door and let you in. But it was a bar. But you had to speak Irish. It was only all Irish language. And also the musicians, of course, heard about this. And you could stay a wee bit later, you know, line up a few pints. Now, I don't want to feed into caricatures about Irish people and drink, which are, of course, grossly unfair and untrue. But anyhow, the thing is that in that place, I started going there because I liked playing music, jam sessions, what we called sessions. And it was a huge success. It was the natural combination, people chatting, people meeting each other. It was the whole point of, so you know, obviously the pub in Ireland is a centre of life, but the point of the pub is meeting people and talking. The centre of what Irish people love more than anything else is the company of other people and chatting. So this Conradh na Gaeilge place was a huge success. And in it, as it happens, it was a tiny little place. It's still there, tiny little place. And also there were people, I was meeting people from the other dialects for the first time, from Connemara and so on. And several of the people, you know, the poets and writers and just people, plumbers and whatever, a lovely mix in a small little area. And that was magic. So that was a natural thing, you know, that made sense. And the second thing that made sense was the radio station, Radio na Gaeilge, which they set up. There was actually a civil rights movement for the Gaeltachts, the Irish-speaking areas in Ireland, in the late 60s and into the 70s. So we were part of that, all this business of student rebellion and campaigning for civil rights and all, both in the north and the south. And in the Irish speakers, it was to get increased funding for Irish language things in the Irish-speaking areas. But anyhow, that led to setting up a radio station, which has been a huge success. So they have a station in Donegal, they have a station for each dialect, and I can be sitting here and have it on, and often do. And more often than not, it's somebody I know has been chatting and interviewing, and you hear about the births, marriages, and deaths, and then some music as well. So that was a very natural thing and a huge success. So to try and find things, because people aren't going to, you know, people like Ryan or myself are going to assist the revival of the language out of our love and out of a sense of duty. But you can't expect an ordinary community to change their language just out of a sense of duty or out of it because this is what we're supposed to be doing. You know, that you can't depend on that. It has to be combined with things that are attractive and pleasant. And if it's young people, the kind of things what young people like enjoy.
Well, talking about the radio station, KFAI, I know, has a Hmong radio hour at least once a week, and there's Somali programming, and I know there's like a native news or there's a native program, but I don't know if they have something where somebody who is not a Dakota speaker and is curious about what it sounds like could tune in. Is there something like that? And might you start a radio station? No, I'm just kidding. You have enough to do. But I mean, with KFAI, you can sign up to do the WAVE project, which is like a volunteer program. I'm just curious about if there's ways in the Twin Cities for folks who are curious simply to hear what it sounds like, because I think it's important to have it spoken into the room or part of things. When I was at the Minneapolis Institute, a project that I did collaboratively with a number of people, including Darlene St. Clair, one of the things that we were really was crucial was that we had the language spoken into the galleries, welcoming people, because the show was about the integration of American art and Native American art and what could come of that. And so the language part, not just translated in labels, but spoken into the room, was super important.
We've tried to do things in the community utilizing QR codes and stuff, so you scan it and then you'll be able to hear it. As far as the radio station, I think it would be awesome. So when you go out west, some of the Lakota tribes have their own radio stations, and they'll have some of them will still have Lakota language hour, where you would just have two elders and they just talk for an hour. And when I was, when I was younger, my cousin would be like, they'd turn it off. But hold on. I really enjoy listening to it. And for like places like so Lower Sioux, we don't really have elders we can go to for the language. So the archive of those radio episodes from Pine Ridge, that really helped me grow my language. Going back, people learn in different ways, but transcribing really helped me, and just hearing that natural rhythm of the language. As soon as I can hand off more responsibilities, that's been talked about, not the radio station, but podcast. And we don't want to just do one and then 2-3 months later do another one. We want to make sure we have 10 episodes ready. We're continually putting those out there. So I have 7 apprentices, adult apprentices I'm working with now. And yeah, as soon as we can build their language up and me and Vanessa can hand off more responsibilities, we would love to do projects like that, and do those, with some of the other reservations, because, if you want, like the Navajo Nation has done, like they've done dub movies and stuff, and when you do something like that, you don't want to have 1 or 2 people doing all the voices. You want to have 20, 30 people who actually sound like the characters. So it's all in the works. It's just going to take time to get there, but it's really cool.
Well, I'm conscious of our time, and I want to make sure that we hear from you all. So if anybody has a question you want to ask, or something you want to add, or something you want to share, just raise your hand, and I'm going to bring this to you so that we can hear you. Okay, awesome.
Any questions? Oh, yep.
I appreciate all the discussion, that made me think a little bit more about my own past. I'm Mexican American. My grandparents spoke fluent Spanish. My parents spoke fluent Spanish. We were forbidden, my generation. You're Americans, don't speak Spanish, speak only English. So that's how I grew up. Because my question, though, is there's this prevailing, not just a sentiment, kind of like a culture here in the U.S. that says assimilate. The past is the past. You came from but you're American now, and so that's the push. Don't be what your grandparents were. Don't be, what your parents were even. You're American now. So can you talk a little bit about that push-pull? Because I just one other bit of information. My grandkids speak fluent Spanish because they were in bilingual daycare here, and so I don't know. It's like 3rd or 4th generation, but no, I mean they speak fluent Spanish and fluent English, from the time they were about 1 year old at Casa Corazon. They were put in that school, and so they learned both languages naturally. Anyway, so can you just talk a little bit about how we can all, I guess, keep what joins us, I guess, as a huge country, but also keep our culture and our language, so that they're both strong. We shouldn't have to choose.
Into the can of worms. No, but so that, even when we were starting out, I was thinking about, and even at home, talking to my wife today, we were talking about some of this here. Coming from Ireland, when I first came here, people were coming up to me and saying, "Oh, I'm Irish," and I said, "Oh, well, where are you from?" And the person would be from Boston or Cincinnati, something, and I wouldn't say to them, "Well, you're not Irish," or they would say, "I'm an eighth Irish," or "I'm Polish, I'm half Polish, I'm half." And you couldn't help as an outsider, and I've been here for decades and decades, but I'm still sort of enjoying being an outsider, if you know what I mean. I'm away somewhere else, and that's kind of interesting. But anyhow, it seemed to me that there was, I think some of the things maybe that Bob said at the very start about identity, and Ryan as well, how you see yourself in the world and the meaning of your life and your identity. You could see immediately that there was an identity problem in this country, if I may say so, having been here all these years. And this may sound incredibly simplistic, but if people, like I have cousins, say I have cousins who live in England, or say somebody moves to Spain or France, they become French or Spanish, They speak French, they speak Spanish. There isn't a problem. But the colonists here, the settlers who came here, didn't take on, well, actually, in some places they did take on the culture of the people, but by and large, the people were decimated, and the settlers didn't accept the actual identities of the nations that they came among. And this created a problem, which still is here, where people will come up to you and say, there's a confusion about identity. So there. But another part of that there, which might be equally contentious or whatever, but really addressing what you were saying, is obviously the business of colonization. So the Europeans came here, took over the land, et cetera, and so that was an act of colonization. But then, with the successive waves of immigrants, they colonized them as well. The immigrants were now colonized by the original colonized. They weren't allowed to speak their languages and so on, which is, I think it's exactly what you're talking about there. And it is a sad thing, So if people losing their languages is just inherently a sad thing. So the United States could be this wonderful cultural mecca of all these different traditions, but that isn't, or languages, which isn't quite what happened, So anyhow, I'm sort of touching on a very, very big subjects there. But languages can just die out, but in colonial situations, they are stamped out. When it's colonialism, they're stamped out. The business of being sent to schools where they try to get you away from your language and all this kind of stuff. Anyhow.
I guess I'm not really conflicted. I had some older uncles and explaining to me, you're a Lakota first and then an American. And when I was young, I didn't understand why we had so many men that went to the military. But the reason it was explained to me is we made concessions, we made treaties with another sovereign nation, the United States, and we said we would defend the land. And another reason, like they said, yeah, that little bighorn, we took that American flag, so technically it's our flag, so. But no, I don't really feel conflicted. Like when I lived in the southeast United States, in Georgia, everybody would say, oh, I'm Scottish or I'm Irish, but they didn't really have the cultural aspect of it. They just descended from someone who at one point in time was Irish or Scottish. And I don't know, like, I So when you travel around the world, you know, it's perfectly normal for people to speak multiple languages, but here in the United States, it's kind of looked down on. I've never really understood that because people who speak multiple languages, they're usually pretty smart. And why wouldn't you want your citizens to be smart? To learn as much as possible. And when you learn other languages, that's that view from that culture's, the view from their lens. And so you can have a better understanding of each other when you learn their language. And, you know, it's a sign of respect. And so, I mean, I speak a little bit of probably 4 or 5 languages just because I'm just kind of a language nerd. But I don't know. You know, I encourage you, like, habla español.
Anybody else? Oh, yeah.
This might be a bit of a superficial question compared to the last one, but I've heard 2 different arguments in terms of placing English subtitles over other languages, especially in media like movies. I've heard some people say that having English subtitles makes things more accessible and might introduce people to the language, and I've heard other people say that having English subtitles is kind of undermining the language and making it so that like it's encouraging people not to learn the language. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that and like which approach is the most, maybe not the most, like not like to make a decision, but like what your thoughts on that are.
Do you want to?
Sure. I mean, I get what you're saying. You would have to be, so like, there is no one-to-one Dakota to English, English to Dakota translation, but we can get kind of close. And so when you put the English up there, it's not going to be literal what the Dakota is saying. It's going to be close, but the English won't be as descriptive or hold as much meaning as the Dakota does. I would like for my people to get to the point where when we do these things, we don't need the English. But for now, we probably need them. But yeah, you don't want to get used to. You don't want to totally rely on that. You know, you want to actually be able to comprehend the language without, you know, needing something to translate for you. But yeah, I mean, it can be useful, but we would like to get away from it because we want to keep things Dakota thought.
Yeah, it might. There's probably pluses and minuses and specific instances. So we have this Irish language TV station as well. And so a lot of people really like it who don't have much Irish. So they're going to watch some programs in Irish and follow it through the English, but they're getting a wee bit of the Irish, you know, they're getting a participation in the Irish language. So I sort of like that, you know, in a general kind of way. I think it's a nice thing. And I think they are, I'm not sure whether it goes there. No, it would just be everybody in Ireland, or almost everybody knows English. So anyhow, yeah.
The first time I was snowed in Ireland because 2 blizzards hit, the Beast of the East storm. I left Minnesota to a blizzard. It was blizzarding when I left. I thought I was going to get delayed, but I made it. Was there for a day and a half, and then 2 blizzards hit. But when I was stuck in the hotel for 5 days, and I started watching some Irish TV, and TG4, and I watched a boxing match, and it was all in Irish language. And without the English, the only thing I was really picking up was August. Every couple words was August. I was like, oh, okay.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And let's give some love to these 2 folks for sharing their thoughts. So the next critical conversation that we will host will be sometime in late April, so we'll get something out to you, and it will be on the topic of humor. So stay tuned for that. Thank you. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have until about 7:30.
All right. Well,
If anybody has any more questions, that is.
yeah.
I lived in Canada for about 10 years, from 85 to, from 75 to about 85. One of the biggest differences was how the Canadians viewed their country with an image. This is public art. They viewed it as a mosaic, which I thought was, so the mosaic, it's a big picture with all the separation with the colors, but all the different colors make up the picture. And I thought that was a wonderful kind of characterization of the difference, that they seem to, as a country, embrace the different cultures of two languages, two official languages, but it was more accepting of all the immigrants over time. I mean, during my 10 years or so there on the West Coast, it went from being a mostly white, English-speaking city. There were people from India, from China, and you go there today, and it is truly a mosaic. So I think it's useful to have sort of a mind's eye picture of what you're trying to do with language and culture, and to me that was the best picture.
Does anybody else? Oh.
I thought that was some. I have a question about your feelings on the importance of like positivity, laughter, joy, and how that contributes to like learning your languages, like for children and yourselves. The role that's had, or if it has one in.
So as Indigenous people, we're around a lot of humorous people, quite a bit. And so Dáithí Sproule, he told me that when he was a boy, that his parents and aunties and uncles, they would have something called Itunshishni Wohadakapi, which is a lying contest. And so they would tell these big, elaborate stories, and it was just, that's what it was. It was just, they were just telling fibs. And they would see who could tell the best fib. And they were always really humorous. So yeah, humor is a big part of Native culture. When I was in Ireland, I noticed there was also, the Irish people, they love to, have that camaraderie, chat, laugh. And we're the same way. When I was learning, my uncles, they would tease me in the language. And so it made me a better speaker, or I learned the language a little bit quicker by like roasting each other, going back and forth. So I learned a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't have learned at that stage. But like I always try to keep my classrooms are always a safe space for the language. Always try to stay positive. We don't there's so many negative connotations with us with education from our past experiences and traumas that I don't really I don't ever try to talk down to a student or correct them in a negative way. I always try to keep it really positive, fun, and engaging. I think that's all I got.
Well, I totally agree. I didn't plan to be a teacher or to teach. I teach a lot of different ages, and I think encouraging people is absolutely crucial. Encouragement, and that's the main thing that I think I bring to. I hope I try to bring to lessons, and yes, not putting people down. So I suppose throughout the conversation this evening, I've been thinking of the word respect, because to me, it's the huge big clue in going through life in a decent way is, you're to respect people and bring respect towards whatever it is, and not in a kind of frowny whatever way. It's just actual respect and enjoyment. So, like I spend hours and hours playing music, probably several hours every day, and I'm just enjoying myself, So if you can find that enjoyment, and try and lure people into it, and I'm sure any teacher has discovered that, like people might be a bit dubious at the start, but you feed the positive experience and so on, and show them that this can be enjoyable, and ultimately, if you really get into a subject, you become sort of obsessed, and then that's really great. And sometimes I say that there's nothing as much fun as being serious about something. Those are my thoughts on the subject.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just a reflection and then a question. The reflection is about the importance of hearing the language. You talked about not just having written, but hearing the language in the room and having the description, and then going to a pub or listening to a podcast or whatever and hearing the language. And so I'm thinking about the films, if they were dubbed in English, any foreign film is dubbed in English, then you lose something because there's an energy and a quality. And then I have a second language, and strangely it's Italian, but I teach Italian. And I've seen the importance of getting used to the sounds. And languages, Italian's very close to English, so the sounds are easier, but there are languages, of course, that are so far away. I started a Finnish class last spring, and that's even close just because at least it's a phonetic language, so that sound is so important. I really appreciate this conversation, and I've been thinking about how language is dynamic and living. It's an organism. So if you're trying to revive a language or not let it die, it's easy to be stuck in what the language was, I imagine. How do you do that dance of the language is evolving? When you go back to Ireland, do you see a lot of changes? And is Irish that's being spoken here very different than there at this point? I have an Italian friend who speaks Italian, kind of a dialect, and he goes back, and they don't understand him anymore. So anyway, that was kind of long, sorry.
Well, there are a lot of interesting things in what you said. The thing about the languages, all languages change. My English accent, when I hear the accent of, we're talking about Derry girls, when I hear about the accents of ordinary people in Derry now, sometimes I wonder, is that the same accent they had when I was a child? I'm not sure it is. Accents just kind of move around and language moves around. The Irish language is, in many ways, you hear lovely native speakers, but I hear all sorts of changes, yes. And there's a certain amount of what you could call decay in the grammar, but it doesn't matter if people are going to speak it. You don't care too much about that. The important thing is for people to speak it. But the thing of hearing is, you're quite right. I'm always talking about it in relation to music. Like the most important thing you can do, say somebody wants to learn to play the guitar, sing songs in Irish, the most important thing is to hear it. So people will come and they'll think that they can play the Irish fiddle or something, and you ask them, well, have you heard any Irish fiddle? You know what I mean? They haven't heard it. So, and that's the hearing, and it can be passive too. I tell people, I've even said it to people just this week, I say, I'll send you a recording of a load of great Irish fiddlers, and just have it on. You don't even have to listen to it consciously, but you have to get it in your unconscious, which is totally relevant to what you were saying. And it's hard to make people that simple fact be clear to people, And so the funny thing is, when I went to the Irish-speaking area, the Gaeltacht, as a teenager, I was 14, you were not allowed to speak a word or sentence of English while you were there. So I was a boy of 14, first time away from home for 3.5 weeks. I thought I was going to be gone for 2.5 weeks. It was 3.5 weeks. I was incredibly lonely, and I could hardly, I could do a bit of grammar, but I could hardly say a sentence. But I wasn't allowed to speak English. So the important thing, immersion sounds as if, I'm going to be immersed and speak lots of the language. But the crucial thing is hearing the language a lot. That's the immersion. So then you gradually discover you know stuff that you didn't even know you knew. So the hearing orientation is very important, I think.
Hearing the language is very important because, there's even a lot of Dakota people that don't speak, or they don't know how to pronounce things if they were to see it. But like if you were to know the orthography, and there's multiple orthographies, if you know those sounds, then you should be able to read and read out loud and say things like you're supposed to. But it's hard to get that natural rhythm. And so like when I was learning, and living in an area where there's no speakers, those recordings and podcasts, like even if I'm not really trying to translate them or transcribe them, if I just listen to them, my body is absorbing that that rhythm. Nowadays, I work with elders, and so I don't have to rely on those recordings as much. But in my classroom, I don't write as much, and I don't use a book. I'll put a couple, key things up on the board, and then we just talk, and I talk. So my classes are 1 hour and 20 minutes. And so my students can never say, well, I've never even heard Dakota before. You hear it Monday through Friday, and I make them talk too. I don't really force them. Like I'll ask questions, go around and ask questions, about somebody, we're describing things, whatever, and they'll just start answering. Like I try not even like calling them, but they absorb it, and when they're comfortable, they'll start producing.
Yeah, I have one too. Oh, you did? Yeah. I don't want to make this too political, obviously, but in the situation that we're going through today with our history, where our history of so many cultures are being written off and ignored and denied that they ever existed, how do you sustain yourself and your students in this environment? Because what you're doing is absolutely necessary, but when so many people are telling you it doesn't exist, why? It must be that give and take that you feel every day. And how do you deal with that in this context of what's going on in our country right now?
Yeah, we are in some pretty crazy times. And then like when I go other countries, they kind of laugh at us for what we're going through. But very crazy times right now. I'm just, I'm really waiting for them. So I also teach a Dakota Studies class. And so the teachers, they usually leave, like the principal and stuff, they leave me. They don't really come into my room, especially like a Dakota language, because they're not going to understand anything anyways, because I work at, the high school is just a regular school, high school in Redwood Falls. But we're about a third of the high school population there. But I just teach the truth. I'm not worried about what the school says. I'm gonna speak the truth about my people and tell how things really were. And if they don't like it, then they don't like it. Like I'm not really concerned about it. I do things for my grandma and those relatives that weren't able to openly do things. It wasn't until 1978 that we had the right to practice our religion and start speaking our languages openly and stuff. And so I'm just going to keep, telling the truth, telling our story. I don't have too many non-native students in my classes, but the ones that do, they're pretty accepting of our culture. And I don't know, I'll just try to be truthful and respectful and, document all these recordings I have, all the stories I have. I'm just, making sure I have those so we can have things to pass down, in case, these children need mentors and stuff, that they'll have these things that can guide them.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important right now for all of us to assert the truth and to not let history be erased, and to talk to your kids and your grandkids and younger people about what's really happened, and to assert that there is a truth. When you have things that have been witnessed collectively by millions of people as having happened, and then you have somebody say it didn't happen, you can't let that be real. You gotta constantly be battling it, and I think right now we're witnessing that will. Somebody else alluded to that, assimilation, and Dáithí put it this is the way that, folks who have come to the United States, often fleeing war and abusive situations and human rights abuses, and have come here being colonized and having their own culture told to them that that's not worth anything, and you need to adopt this imaginary identity, which is invented. I think we lose something collectively as a human community. And so I think all of those things are at play right now. And I think it's all up to us individually to figure out what our relationship is to that. And it is the time to say, this is what the truth is, and assert that in your family and your community.
Well, my comment and question is on such a different level than where we just went. So I just want to honor kind of like the gravity of, this moment, and then maybe bring us back to the mosaic. I love that idea of the mosaic and the contrast in, a culture and a country, a nation that can sort of embrace mosaic versus the melting pot, which really is about disappearing differences and erasing, right? Erasure, which is such a key part of American history, erasure. Anyway, taking it back to a sort of a more lighter level, maybe, my question is, I think, Ryan, especially you, talked about you can't know a people without knowing their language. You only know them through their language, right? So that essential part of a community's identity is through the way they speak. And I'm wondering for both of you, if you might give us a couple examples of some of the things that are sort of treasures in the respective languages, things you love. It could be vocabulary, it could be expressions, it could be euphemisms, is that the right word? Sayings, colloquialisms, whatever. I mean, obviously we don't have much time, but just maybe a couple of examples that really epitomize for you something that's unique about each of the languages that isn't present in English, that doesn't exist, or isn't analogous, there isn't a parallel in English.
One of my favorite idioms in Dakota is "Teha inunke cha mato nimenanktedo." So if you keep laying there, you're gonna smell like a bear. And so that was said like laziness was something really frowned on back in the day, and so that was kind of one of those sayings. But Dakota language is very, very descriptive. For me, it paints a picture. And so when an elder speaks, I know exactly what's going on. Like, he just totally paints a picture for me. So English doesn't do that for me. Yeah, if you look at the Dakota to English and English to Dakota dictionaries, there's a lot more Dakota words than English words. So there's a lot of emotion words, a lot of descriptive words, and in our language, like the action comes at the end of what is being said, whereas Dáithí's language, the action comes at the beginning. And that's something really hard for people to comprehend too, is like the different sentence structures. But I mean, all those things make languages unique and make them beautiful. And I really honestly respect all languages.
So I don't know, well, one thing about Irish, you see, I'm teaching songs in Irish to people who don't speak Irish. And I love the fact that people enjoy it, even if they're not learning the language. And I've come to feel that, I'm a native English speaker. I started learning Irish when I was 11 properly. So, but I feel there's a level in Irish poetry and maybe in speech that is extra to English. There's a physicalness about the words and the sound. They're like physical objects, and I try and think of a comparison where, you have somebody who is feeling a beautiful material, like it's a physicality. I would be surprised if it wasn't the same in Dakota. But anyhow, so I was trying to think of some other more concrete examples. And there are a couple of, there's proverbs and idioms and all these stuff, but they have that in all languages. But anyhow, there are certain ones in Irish that are so compressed and succinct that I think they're amazing. So one is, there are thousands of proverbs, that many of which were still known, by native speakers up to the present day. So one of them is, Bíonn siúlach scialach. And shul means to walk and therefore to travel. And the siúlach, the ach makes it into an adjective. So let's say travelsome. Is the verb to be. Scialach, scial is a story. So travelsome person is storysome. As a person who travels a lot will have lots of stories. Bíonn siúlach scialach. So I really love that there. And the other one is from the Bible, and of course a very important one that is very succinct in the Irish, and that is, An ché tá sir, caithead sé cloch. So literally, the bare bones bit would be, the one who is free, let him throw a stone. The person who's free of blame, let them throw the first stone. But the Irish just says, An ché tá sir, caithead sé cloch. I like that.
I would say my favorite Irish phrase would probably be Tiki Arla. And then when I talked at Celtic Junction, or about a month ago, I actually had to go through Zoom because I had the flu. But they asked me what would be something similar in Dakota. And I was like, well, we don't really say anything that says like our time will come, but we do say Makoti ikikchu, which is land back. And I think both of those things mean the same.
All right. Well, let's end on land back. Thank you again. And thank you, Dáithí and Ryan.
Yes. Yeah, no, thank you. And before we close out, I'd like to thank the Minnesota Humanities Center for generously funding the Critical Conversation series. Oh, sorry, I'll slide in here with the crew. For funding the Critical Conversation series of 2025, Rondo Community Library for inviting us to the space, free of charge. Thank you. WACPA curators Angela Two Stars and Bob Cozzolino, who have ideated the themes and selected participants in this current critical conversation series. Also, thank you, Bob, for curating and making this smooth first critical conversations for me. And also our panelists, thank you both so much for being here as well. They left, but our volunteers, Emma and Lolly, and all of you for coming and contributing and bringing great energy. So thank you. And our next critical conversations will take place in late April, which, as Bob mentioned, will center humor. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful night.